Okay. Welcome, everybody. I think we'll get started so we can learn as soon as possible. My name is Liz Medallia. I'm the chair of the ABA Standing Committee on the Law Library of Congress. The Law Library and the ABA Standing Committee co-sponsor this event at the mid-year meeting, at the annual meeting, and last spring we did it as a webinar which had 6,000 attendees, like 2,000 more than any other it had. So there's obviously, that's a testament to two things. One, there is an interest in and a need for this subject matter, and two, Matt in particular's quality of the presentation that he makes. He's been doing it and he's terrific. So just a couple of things before I introduce the speakers. In the back are materials, including materials about the traveling facsimile exhibit on the Magna Carta that the Standing Committee and the Law Library are putting together to launch in next year to celebrate the 800th anniversary of Magna Carta. And right now we're in the fundraising phase of that, so the materials in the back are about fundraising. And if you have any questions about it, there's contact information on the flyer. Number two, if any of you, after hearing this presentation, are affiliated with an ABA entity and you think that that entity or people from it would be interested in a tour of the Law Library or a presentation, seeing some of these materials, please contact the Standing Committee or me or Amy, who's outside. She's our fabulous staff director. And we can facilitate a tour for you and for people who are interested at the Law Library. When Matt says, as he will, that they're interested in meeting people and showing the Law Library, which is the nation's law library, to individual people, they mean it. They very much are. And it's an amazing place. I hope that after this session you'll know more about how to do legal research online for free, but also that you'll learn and know more about what's available to you as an individual in your practice through the Law Library, because it's an under-known resource that is available to practicing lawyers and to the public. Without further ado, we have two speakers this morning. As I mentioned, Matt Braun, who's a senior legal research specialist at the Law Library, and also Barbara Bavis, who is a legal reference librarian there. In addition to being here, the Standing Committee and the Law Library have a booth at the ABA Expo in the Public Services Division part. And they will be there part of the time, so if you have a particular question, if you like their help, go over to the Expo and they will help you. In addition, go by the FJE booth, because near the FJE booth there is the Magna Carta booth, and that has more information about what the ABA has in store for celebrating the 800th anniversary of Magna Carta. And as I say, the 800th anniversary is in 2015. It's not as big as the 1000th anniversary is going to be, but it's all right. So thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Liz, for that introduction. As Liz mentioned, my name is Matt Braun, and this is my colleague Barbara Bavis, and I want to take this opportunity to welcome Barbara to the ABA family, and in particular, the Law Library of Congress's strong relationship with the American Bar Association, which goes back to 1932. And the Standing Committee on the Law Library of Congress began in conjunction with the 100th anniversary of the Law Library of Congress itself. So that relationship is very important to us, and we're so very happy to be here in San Francisco this morning with you. Before we begin, I just have two things if I could ask you. Before you leave today, this little gray evaluation form, if you wouldn't mind just taking a few moments and filling that out, that helps us improve the presentation. It helps us to address questions that maybe you have that we haven't addressed during the presentation. So if you wouldn't mind just taking a moment and filling that out. And then the materials that are at the back of the room are also available on the Standing Committee on the Law Library of Congress's website. So you can get all of that material there. And then the last thing I'll mention, Liz mentioned the webinar that we had back on May 20th, and Barbara participated on that as well. And for those of you who participated, who listened in that day and submitted questions, first of all, I want to thank you so very much for being present virtually. It's really a thrill to know that we had 6,000 people that day. The other thing is the presentation that we're going to do today has some review from that webinar, but then there are added things to it, so it's not exactly the same presentation. The other thing I will mention is if you submitted a question to us from the webinar, we're still working on giving answers back to folks. We received about 300 questions, so it is a lot to get through. Some of those repeat themselves, and so what we're going to go ahead and do is probably come up with one document that answers some of those questions and put that, ask for that to be put on the Standing Committee's website. Hopefully today, if you had a question from that session, the additions to the presentation answer that question. And so without further ado, I will begin with the presentation. And as you can see, this is the contact information. We have phone numbers on the last slide for both Barbara and myself. And then you have our email addresses right there. Before we begin with the substance, again, I just want to kind of go over what the Law Library of Congress is, particularly for those of you who have not seen the Library of Congress and are not familiar with the structure. The Library of Congress has about we always say it has about, it seems to change, strangely enough, but 19 publicly accessible reading rooms, the Law Library being one of them. We're located in the Madison building at the Library of Congress, which is the utilitarian-looking structure across the street from the Jefferson building, which is the beautiful one that you see in National Treasure and everything. You know, what you think of when you think of the Library of Congress. We have 2.84 million volumes in the Law Library. And that's just books. That doesn't include our microform and our other materials. And that does make us, as far as we know, the largest law library in the world, because even the largest academic libraries usually have just over 1 million items. We have about 30,000 volumes in our public reading room in the Madison building. Importantly for practicing attorneys, if you have a question on foreign, international, or comparative law, we have a global legal research center where we have staff who are foreign-trained attorneys, so they earn their JDs in foreign countries. Many of them have LLMs and master's degrees, and in some cases PhDs earned here in the United States. And so if you have a question on those areas of law, something that you can't find, what you can do is give us a call at the reference desk. The phone number right there is the phone number for the reference desk, and that appears a couple times during the slides. And we can try to help you at the reference desk, and if your question involves a little more detail, we'll connect you with those specialists in the Global Legal Research Center. So please don't be shy in contacting us. And again, these are the primary jurisdictions that we cover. The responsibility of the Global Legal Research Center, first and foremost, is to members of Congress. It's kind of like the Congressional Research Service, if you're familiar with that entity. However, they also have a very important responsibility in responding to constituent requests, and within that, practicing attorneys are a high priority of the Global Legal Research Center. So again, please do contact us. Okay, so what we're going to go ahead and do this morning is start off with some background on some of the materials that we have up on the Law Library of Congress's website, and then we're going to go ahead and talk about non-Law Library of Congress resources that are free and trustworthy and items that I think will be of great interest to you. I'm going to go ahead and introduce a couple of these. Barbara's going to go into some more detail on how to use them, and then I'm going to continue on with the free resources that are not supported by the Law Library, and then at the end we'll take any of your questions and any discussion that you'd like to have. The homepage for the Law Library of Congress is very simple. It's www.law.gov. So you can go there and see our different resources. And the 5 resources that we want to point out this morning are our Guide to Law Online, our Current Legal Topics, our Global Legal Monitor, And then Thomas and congress.gov. If you've done research on federal legislation, you probably have used at least one of those products. And so with that, what I'd like to do is turn this over to Barbara, who's going to talk about the law library's products.
Hi, everyone. Again, my name is Barbara Bavis. If you call the desk at the law library, I'm likely to be one of the people that you get. So hello now, and hopefully hello then. I'm just going to talk briefly about our website and some of the things that we cover. Can you hear me?
Did everyone
Am I
hear
loud
okay?
enough?
Everyone?
Okay, good.
Okay.
So again, our website is law.gov. If you type that in, this is approximately what you're going to see. I just want to point out a few things on the website. If you scroll down just a little bit, you're going to see our hours and contact information. And please feel free to call us. There's also our Ask a Librarian service, which I'll go into a little bit later. But today we're going to largely be focusing on the Guide to Law Online, the legal topics and or current legal topics. They're called different things on the website, and Global Legal Monitor. All right. So the Guide to Law Online is our collection of over 9,000 links. We go through it periodically and make sure that those links still work. If you do find a dead link, please let us know. We're constantly updating it, as I'm sure you know. Those links can go dead in no time. So we cover the United States, states and territories. We also do the nations of the world and different territories within that. We also have a federal section. And all of these sites are the law as it's available for free online. So this is the front page of the Guide to Law Online. As you see, you have a couple different choices here. We're going to focus first on nations of the world. This is our nations of the world front page. It's done alphabetically, so you can choose A through Z and then the country or the territory that you're interested in. When you click one of those, we have an example of Egypt. You'll get a page similar to this. We break it down largely into 6 sections: constitution, executive, judicial, legislative, legal guides, and general sources. Now, the amount of information you're going to find on these websites varies from country to country. Also, what's in English and what's not varies from country to country. So if you find that a lot of the links you see here are not in English and you're having trouble finding what you need, again, call us at the front desk. We'll try to connect you with one of our legal specialists or foreign legal specialists. As you see here, if you scroll down the page, we have the legal guides section. The legal guides section, I think, is very important. We link you not only to outside sources that have guides on the country or the area, but we also link you to other sources within the law library website that might have helpful information. Now, if instead you are going to click the United States, States and Territories link, you'd get a page similar to this. We've chosen the District of Columbia just as an example, since that's where we are. You'll see we have the same 6 areas that we cover. And here you'll see an example of the executive and judicial entries. One thing I want to bring up under the legal guides section for the states and territories is not only do we link to our own website, but we also link to the local legal libraries in that area. So you'll look to that there. We also link you to the law schools and their websites, which people find interesting, especially when the state or territory is not mentioned in the law school's name. So it's easy to find them right here. Okay. A lot of those websites will link you to articles that you'll find in our current legal topics section and our global legal monitor section. They both somewhat deal with international law as well as our U.S. states and territories, but they have different focuses. The current legal topics will cover international law, but it has a broader focus. So it does historical events. It covers the United States and some issues we have here. It also has reports that are more in-depth. And I'll show you an example of that in just a moment. The Global Legal Monitor focuses solely on international and comparative law. It's more frequently updated. If I had to do a comparison, the current legal topics is more of kind of an essay on a topic, whereas the Global Legal Monitor is more like a news article. But they both have really great information, and the Global Legal Monitor will give you persistent URLs, so you can share the website with other people and not worry about it going bad. So here's an example of our current legal topics page. As you'll see here, there'll be topics as well as country names. If you click on that country, it's just going to collect all the essays done on that country in one place. So you're not going to see something on just Israel. You're going to see all the articles that have been done about that country. Right? And here's an example of a current legal topics article. The reason we have the slide, and one thing I want to point out, is that we have footnotes or endnotes throughout the document. These point you to the primary source material that we use, that our researchers use when they write these. So you can actually scroll down to the bottom of the page, and you're going to see exactly where they got their information and be able to track that down yourself. We think this is important because a lot of the things you see on the web, they talk about an issue, but they don't actually tell you where they got that information. So this points you right to it. It also gives you the author name. If you want to talk to that author, you can give us a call and we'll try and direct you to them. All right, here's an example of a Global Legal Monitor article. Again, we do have citations here as well. They aren't as formalized as the current legal topics, so usually you'll find it just in parentheses next to a sentence, if we can link you to it. Okay. Again, at the end of the Global Legal Monitor page, you're going to have a link to the author, so you're going to be able to link to other articles written by that same author. As Matt mentioned, a lot of our foreign legal specialists focus in a certain area of the world. So you're going to see a lot of, you did, right? So a lot of the authors, if you click that link, you're going to be able to see what else they've written on, and it's usually in approximately the same area, the same countries. Okay? You can also click on the jurisdiction. So if you're only interested in that one country, you can click that and see only the articles on that country, no matter who they were written by. And also, if you're interested in the topic and not necessarily the jurisdiction, you can click on the topic and it's going to show you all the articles on that topic. Okay. All right. So I'm also going to talk about our legislative information systems. Right now we have two. The one you're probably most familiar with, because it's our kind of old faithful, is Thomas. Thomas has bill summaries going back to 1973. It's a great place to go if you want to find information about the bills and resolutions introduced into Congress. The bills and resolutions you're interested in do not necessarily have to have been passed. So if you're just interested about something that was introduced, this is the place to go. We also have bill text from 1989. We have it from 1989 in HTML, but we also have it in PDF from 1995 forward. Some people are interested in seeing exactly the PDF of how it looks. So from 1995 forward, we have you covered. We also have selected congressional committee reports from 1995 forward. I'll show you in a moment. Even if we don't have the report linked, we'll at least give you enough information that you can find it at a library near you, or hopefully online if we can get you one online. We also have information on Thomas about treaties and presidential nominations. And I'll show you how to find those.
Just to interject here, this question comes up sometimes. Thomas is for Thomas Jefferson. You'd be amazed how many people call a reference as, what's Thomas mean?
That's true. I have had that question before. All right, so this is the Thomas page. I know it can be a little busy, so we've got those squares up there, and I'm going to explain a little bit about each section. So if you look on the left-hand side, you're going to see links to the congressional record, presidential nominations, and treaties. All right, so the kind of non-bills and resolutions information is on that left-hand side. On the right-hand side, you're going to see our weekly top 5. These are the most popular bills and resolutions of the week. So, you know, a lot of people are interested in just one bill that's been in the news. It gives you a direct link to it right there. So that's been helpful for some people. They don't have to go searching around. In the center, I'm going to start at the bottom. One of the things we get a lot of questions about is tracking appropriations bills through Congress. We have a link there to appropriations bills information. It's actually a really helpful chart about all the bills and resolutions that have been introduced about appropriations, whether or not they were passed, and it gives you links to those bills, okay? And it gives you information also about when they were introduced, if they were passed, when they were passed, stuff like that. We have that information from the mid-90s forward. And also, the main part of the page is our search feature. I want to let you know, if you're searching on Thomas and you search from our front page, you're only going to be searching the current Congress. So right now, the 113th Congress. That throws a lot of people for a loop. They're looking for something from 1999. They search here, they can't find it. That's why. So if you're searching for anything that's from a previous Congress, I want you to click that Try the Advanced Search link. All right, and then you're going to be able to choose from the next page what Congress you want, and I'm going to show you that in just a second. Now, if you do search from that front page, you want the current Congress, and you enter in a phrase or some keywords, you're going to get a results page similar to this. This is the results page for cap and trade in our current Congress. So where cap and trade appears in the summary for the bill or resolution. You'll see here, just the results page gives you a lot of information. So you're going to have the bill number, the title, the sponsor, the number of co-sponsors. Often there's a lot of co-sponsors, so you have to click to the next page to get all of them. And then it gives you information about the last congressional action taken on the bill. This can be really helpful if you're looking for something that became public law, so you're interested in something that passed. It's really easy to see from just at a glance which of the bills were actually made public law. Okay? If you're interested in one of those bills and you click the bill number, you're going to get a page like this. We call this the bill summary and status page. And this is kind of the jumping off page where you can get the information that you're looking for on that bill. I want to note one thing about the Thomas page from here. The links in your address bar are not durable. So you can't just copy that and send it to someone. Instead, we ask you to click the Share Save link, which is on the right-hand side. Yeah, right over there. And then it's going to give you a permanent link that you can then send to people. Another thing we wanted to point out, you can get a lot of information from this page. If I stayed here and told you about it, I'd keep you here way too long, and Matt has much more interesting things to talk about. But the two things that people ask us the most about are how to get the text of legislation. So we have a link there. I'm going to show you what that looks like. And also what happened to the bill and when. And that's under the All Congressional Actions link, and I'll show you that as well.
And just to let you know, the library has joined the 21st century with congress.gov. We don't, all of the URLs are permanent.
Yeah, and I'll talk about that in just
right,
a second.
so yeah, we're getting away from this.
Right.
Having to take this step of actually clicking on the share sign.
Yeah, but for the older bills and resolutions, so about 1993 back, you're going to want to be using Thomas. So that's why we're kind of warning you about how to use it now. So here is what happens when you click on the bill text link. You have two options. If the bill is young enough, I guess I should say, you can have either the printer-friendly version, which is the HTML version, or the PDF version. People seem to like the PDF version better because you get everything all at once. With the HTML version, you do have to click on those different links to get to the different sections. But feel free to do that, and sometimes the HTML is your only option, I'm sorry. But it's still there, you just have to click on the links to get to the things you want.
And the PDF is technically on the Government Printing Office's Federal Digital Systems site, so you'll just be asked to give your permission to go to their site.
Don't be scared, they're not going to take your information or anything. We use them.
Yes.
If you click the All Congressional Actions page, you're going to get something that looks like this. It's going to give you everything that Congress did to the bill while it was going through Congress. All right, and it's going to give it to you in date format. So instead of being split into Senate and House, it's just going to give you as it went through what happened to it. Okay. One thing that's really interesting about this page. First of all, we get a lot of questions about legislative history information, and I don't want to go too far into that, but congressional committee reports and hearings. We do have some of the reports, and those are linked where available. But if you're interested in the information and it's not linked or it's not available on this site, it'll still give you the date, the committee, what they did to it, so whether it was a hearing or a report, and you can use that information to find it in the books or call us and ask us to help you find it. So feel free to use this even if you don't think you're going to get a direct link from it. We can always help you with the rest. So we have Congressional Record Pages linked, that's the CR, which is over here. But we also have another thing that's really interesting for people is vote information. You're either going to see roll number or record vote number depending on whether it was the Senate or the House that dealt with the bill. And it's going to link you directly to the Senate or House webpage about the vote. And that gives you a lot of information that people don't even know is out there. This is from 1989 forward, by the way. This information is online. And it's going to give you information about not only who said yay or nay, but also where they're from, who they're representing, and their party. All right. Now, if you do click the advanced search link, so everything we did there was for the current Congress. If you need a past Congress and you click the advanced search link, it's going to bring you to this page. Now you do, unless you select search multiple Congresses, which I'll show you in just a moment, you'll have to choose which Congress you want to search. Don't be afraid if you only have the year and you don't know which Congress. There's a Congress to year conversion link there, and it'll tell you which Congress you're looking for. Don't be embarrassed about having to use it. I still use it to this day, and I deal with Thomas every day. So please feel free to click that link. Before I show you the search multiple Congresses, I want to let you know that you can search by keyword or by bill number. And all you have to do is click that drop-down menu with the circle around it, and you're going to be able to choose from there. So when you do search by bill number, use S or HR, depending on Senate or House. So if you click the Search Multiple Congresses link, you come to this page, and from 1990 forward, you can select whatever Congresses you want. So if you know it was in the early 90s, but you're not sure when, you can select the Congresses that apply there and do the same search we talked about. You also can, from that previous page, which I should have brought up before, you can also search. You can search by keyword. You can also search by who was the sponsor of the bill. There's several things you can kind of drill down on that search screen, and feel free to do that. A lot of times we get calls and they can remember the senator or the representative that introduced the bill, but they can't remember what it was called, and they know it was about a certain topic. So feel free to do the keyword search and then specify the member down below.
There's more options further down this page when you're searching the bill summary and status for a particular Congress.
All right, so now come to congress.gov, which is everyone's new favorite website in terms of our websites. I don't know about the other non-Library of Congress websites. But congress.gov, actually, we just did an update, and it's from 1993 forward, I believe. I don't want to, yeah, we have bill text from 1993 forward. At this point, I used to say we only have 2001 forward, but we just made a new update. So if it's in the early 90s forward, please feel free to use congress.gov. It has what I like to say is a much more user-friendly setup. You don't have to choose what Congress you want on that front page. You can do just a general Google-like search on that front page. One thing I do want to say is that there is a drop-down menu, and you can specify from that drop-down menu whether you want to search legislation, whether you want to search member profiles, so profiles about the senators and representatives. And we have that information from about 1973 forward. And also, if you want to search the congressional record, you can search that separately. Okay. Another thing I want to point out is that we still have kept that kind of weekly top 5 information. So right under the search, you can have the most viewed bills. It's generally the same thing. And as Matt brought up earlier, one of the great things about congress.gov is even though we have that share save feature on congress.gov, these are going to be durable links. So you can actually copy and paste from your address bar and send it to people if you're so inclined, and we hope you do. All right, if you do a search, you're going to get a results page that's similar to this. One thing I like to say about the difference between Thomas and congress.gov is on Thomas you have to kind of make all your editing choices before you do the search, whereas on congress.gov you can do a big search and then limit your search from the results page, which I think is a lot more user-friendly and helpful for people. If you look on the left-hand side, you'll see just an example of some of the things you can limit by. Congress is usually the big one, and then also, if you do a search, just generally all sources, you can then limit by the type of source. So if you've done that kind of general search and you're like, no, I don't really want congressional record pages that you might get hundreds of them. I just want the legislation. So you can select that here. If you know you only want bills that were introduced by the Senate, you can choose that too. And further down, we also have subject headings, which people find really helpful. I want to just note that the results page, the results of the bills actually look pretty similar to Thomas. I mean, they're prettier, but they have a lot of the same information as Thomas. The big difference is instead of just having the latest action information, it also has a tracker bar. And the tracker bar means that at a glance you can better see how far that bill went in Congress. So, and it actually is on the next page as well. So if you click the bill number, you'll get this bill summary and status page. And the tracker information is going to be right there in that summary box. A lot of the same information is on this page is in Thomas. The big difference is that you're going to be clicking tabs instead of links. Okay, so look down to those tabs below the summary bar to find what you need. The one we have linked here is the text tab. That's what a lot of people are interested in. If it's become public law, we actually have a link to the public law. We also have different versions of the bill as it went through Congress, so you can choose that from the drop-down menu there. You'll see here there's also summaries included in congress.gov, summaries of the bill, and it's going to highlight your search terms within that summary as you go down. The summaries are approved by CRS, the Congressional Research Service. All right, so before I turn it over to Matt, I just want to talk about our Ask a Librarian service. We're open from 8:30 to 5, Monday through Saturday, the reference desk. But if you have a question that's a little more in-depth or it's after business hours, please feel free to use our Ask a Librarian service. We love getting questions from the public. If you are on the regular website, so this is loc.gov, and you click the Ask a Librarian link, you can then choose law from that list, and it'll just have a little electronic form for you to fill out. We do respond within 5 days, so whether it's an answer or clarification, sometimes we need a little bit more information to be able to get what you need. So please feel free to contact us. We want to hear from you. And with that, I will turn it over to Matt. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Barbara. Just a couple of things. As Barbara mentioned, our hours, 8:30 to 5, of course, that's Eastern time. So one of the things we deal with at the end of the day, at the end of our day, are calls from Californians. And it's great. We love our constituents from the Golden State. The only rub is that sometimes they'll take us to the next day to really get back to you. So one of the ways you can contact us if it's closer to 5 o'clock here in San Francisco, for instance, is to send us a request to Ask a Librarian, or just to give us a call the next morning, and we'll be very happy to help you. One other thing I just want to mention is, and we talked a little bit about Thomas and congress.gov. Congress.gov will replace Thomas at some point. It may be sometime in 2014 or 2015. Right now, congress.gov, as you probably noticed, the word beta is there. It's in its beta form. And basically, what this means is the Library of Congress and many different offices of the Library of Congress are adding content to it periodically. Right now, in terms of the tracking of legislation and going back, congress.gov goes back to 2001, to the 107th Congress, which is 2001, 2002. Thomas goes back to the 101st Congress, which is 1989-90. So again, that's one distinction there. Eventually, congress.gov will cover and go all the way back in the same way that Thomas does. But right now, that's why we're showing you both. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is shift gears into probably what many of you came here for this morning, which is to for sites where you can find case law, and also products that can give you some kind of citation authority information. Unfortunately, there are no free versions of those citators, and I'll go through that in great detail in just a moment. But these are the sites that are not managed by the Law Library of Congress or the Library of Congress generally, but are sites that we use every day in our work, and the ones that we suggest practicing attorneys across the country to use. And here are the URLs on these screenshots. We're going to talk a little bit about findlaw.com. FindLaw is actually now operated by Thomson Reuters, so it does have the West imprimatur to it. The proper URL is actually lp.findlaw.com, LP being for legal professionals. There is a public version of FindLaw, but you'll want to use the legal professional version. And then I'm going to talk about the Public Library of Law, which is operated by Fastcase. And then Google Scholar, which is now becoming more and more useful for attorneys. And then also jurisdiction-specific sources for case law. I'm going to highlight the Judicial Branch of California's site, which is quite good for this. The Federal Digital System, which I mentioned before, or FDSys, which is the information site that the U.S. Government Printing Office has for federal government documents. And then the House of Representatives Office of the Law Revision Council. It's a really long title. But they have a very nice version of the United States Code, which is continuously updated in the same way that Lexis and Westlaw, for instance, update the code. There's also a popular name tool at that site that I'm going to show you that's quite helpful. Regulations.gov, where you can see regulations that have been published in the Federal Register, and in some cases even view the comments that have been submitted for those. USA.gov, which is the official portal for the federal government. The Legal Information Institute site, which is operated by Cornell University Law School. Justia, which is very similar to FindLaw, and then the Lexis website, which is a nice tool to search for articles. HG, formerly known as herosgamos.org, which is another site good for finding articles. And then if you're doing niche research, if you're looking for presidential material, proclamations and executive orders, the American Presidency Project right here, not terribly far down the road at UC Santa Barbara, has a wonderful site for that. Even NOLA, which is usually thought of as really best for public users, does have some nice material. And then there's some subject-specific material. I'm going to use an intellectual property site as an example. And then if you're doing historical legal research, the Avalon Project at Yale Law School is often a helpful product. So with that, I'd like to start with findlaw.com. And this is the home page, as you can see, Find Law for Legal Professionals. And if I go over here to click on Cases and Codes, this is where I'm going to be able to get to the case law that's on Find Law. There's quite a lot of it. Some of it's on the Find Law website itself. Some of it is, some of the links that are on Find Law go to other products. And so it's really both what we call a proprietary product, meaning that the material's there on the site. It's also a portal, meaning it's linking into other sites. You can also, right from the home page, go down here to research the law, search for a case. You can actually search for contracts. They do have some model contracts on the site. And then also search for articles. So again, this is quite a useful one-stop shop for this type of material. Now, if you click on that Cases and Codes link, you're going to come on over to this box here at the upper left-hand corner. The one thing I want to point out before I show you this search here is over here on the right-hand side, there's a link for U.S. Supreme Court. Many times users of Find Law are trying to find Supreme Court opinions. These opinions go all the way back to 1893 on Find Law, so that is quite extensive. Now, if you have a court decision that you know if you've got the citation, you can put that in on the Find Law homepage. Let's say you just want to do a search on subject in a particular court. Let's say I'm interested in the United States Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit, and I come over here to D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals, and I'm interested in family law cases. I can click on that, and I'm going to get some results for the last few years. And I can go into both a summary of the decision and then the PDF coming right from the DC Circuit's website. So again, are you going to have every decision here? No, but there are a lot of them. And so that's a good place to start your research. And there are other products that you're going to want to use to supplement it that I'll show you in just a moment. Now back at the U.S. Supreme Court opinions link, remember 2 slides ago, we have this link right here. We click on that, we come into this page. Now this is a page where you can type in the citation, the U.S. report citation that you have if you want to get a decision, or you can do a party name search or a full text search. And that's often helpful, particularly if you don't have the citation, you're going to want to use one of those two. And so again, you can click on the tabs here and do that. Now, I'm going to search on 388 U.S. 1. Does anyone know what citation that's for? Okay, it's Loving v. Virginia. We're going to see it in just a moment. But of course, that was an unfair question. At the bottom of the page, also, there's a lot of very interesting material. There's the Find Law Supreme Court Center, and I point this out to you because many times practicing attorneys, particularly if they're doing any work in federal court, are interested in records and briefs for cases. And Find Law does have briefs for the U.S. Supreme Court, and their coverage is kind of strange. It's 1999 through 2007. And you might wonder, why don't they have the more recent ones, and why don't they go back further? Well, there's a few reasons, I think, for that, and I'll share those with you in just a moment. But before we get to the Supreme Court Center, let's just go and do a search. Let's say I know the citation in Loving v. Virginia. I put it in 388 U.S. 1. I do a search there, and I get the opinion. Now, I'm getting the opinion just in the HTML that's on the Find Law site. I'm not getting the opinion from the U.S. reports. So again, that's one thing to keep in mind. You're actually just getting the opinion on their site. However, there is pagination here. This would be the equivalent of like the star pagination that you see in Lexis and Westlaw, where you'll have your citation given throughout the opinion. And so if you're citing the particular language, you have a reference in which to cite to that language, and so that's quite helpful. Now back at the U.S. Supreme Court Center, where we can find our briefs, if we click on that link, we have a few options here. Let's go ahead and just click on the briefs link. And again, we come into briefs for the term starting in 1999 through 2007. Now, from 2007 to the present, I'm going to show you in just a few slides a site that the ABA actually manages. And this is a site that is linked from the supremecourt.gov website itself, where you can find the records and briefs for the last, or I should say the most recent 2 terms of the U.S. Supreme Court. Why is there this gap between 2008 and, let's say, 2012? The best answer I can come up with, and this is my theory, is that Westlaw is providing the briefs for many folks. Many times, attorney access to Westlaw law, student law school, faculty access to Westlaw includes the records and briefs for federal court decisions, including the U.S. Supreme Court. So that may have something to do with it. Hopefully, in the future, those briefs will be available in one central spot. Now, you can sometimes take the information that you have for a case and just do a Google search, particularly if you go to Google Scholar. That's even a better search because that's crawling websites of a little more specific nature. And you can often find the briefs that way. Sometimes firms, particularly if they were representing a party where there was an appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court, they certainly will put the briefs up on their website many times because that's wonderful publicity for the firm. And so, again, you may want to just do a search along those lines. If you're going back before 1999, generally you have to go to a Supreme Court depository library, and there are about 12 of those around the country. The Law Library of Congress is one. I think on the West Coast, the University of Washington's Law Library in Seattle is one, where they actually have the briefs generally in microfiche. Again, if you need to find this material, what I would do is go ahead and send us a message. You ask a librarian or give us a call at the reference desk in the Law Library of Congress, and we'll be happy to point you in the right direction. When you click on a brief in Find Law from 1999 to 2007, you're getting the PDF of the brief. This is a petition for review in this case. And again, you typically get the petition, you'll get the briefs from the parties, and if the parties that were asked at some point to brief a particular legal issue, you'll get that as well. So Find Law is putting some of this stuff out there, and again, it's a step in the right direction. Hopefully down the line we'll have more of these briefs available on the free web. Okay, I mentioned that ABA site. It's supremecourtpreview.org, or www.supremecourtpreview.org. This is really wonderful in that it takes the last couple of years of briefs, and so if you're looking for the briefs on the Voting Rights Act case that was recently decided by the court, or the court's decision involving the constitutionality of the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act, you're going to be able to find those briefs at this site. You'll just click on these links here on the left-hand side. If I can get my cursor to work, there we go. For the last couple terms, and you just click on the decision, and you should have full access to the briefs. And you're basically getting everything the court has released to the Supreme Court depository libraries. And so again, this is very helpful for the most recent material. To go back to Find Law for just a moment, if you go back to the Cases and Codes link on the home page, remember that's where we started just a moment ago. If you click on that and you scroll down that page a little bit, you're going to have a lot of links for specific pages for federal courts, but of course, many of us are practicing state law. And Find Law is a wonderful resource for state law. And let's say we click on the link for Florida. Let's say I'm sweating it out this summer down in Miami somewhere, practicing away. And I'm interested in what's on the free web, what's on Find Law regarding Florida law, resources. And let's say I'm interested in records and briefs from the Supreme Court of Florida. Many of these jurisdictions do have such things available. You just have to go to the link for that particular state. Let's say I click on this link. These are records and briefs for the Supreme Court of Florida that Florida State University has put up, their law school has put up. And again, you're going to get a link to all these different types of briefs, and then you're getting a PDF, a digitized image of the original brief. So again, there's a lot of stuff out there that would be really hard to find if you didn't go to a site such as Find Law. You'd be doing Google searches, Yahoo searches, and getting a lot of information, and be too much, and it wouldn't be focused, and it would take too much time to go through. That's why a site like Find Law is so helpful. So again, it's quite good for state law research. The next site that's good for case law research, both at the federal and state levels, is the Public Library of Law, which is operated by Fastcase. I did a search here on ammonium nitrate. Now, you might ask, what is that? Well, do you remember the explosion in West Texas earlier in the year? That was because of improperly stored ammonium nitrate. And so, let's say I'm interested in court decisions in all jurisdictions where ammonium nitrate as a product is an issue. So I can do a search, put the search box right here. I can also limit my search at the advanced options link right there. But let's say I just do a search on ammonium nitrate. At the very top, I get 161 decisions. Now again, I haven't limited to a particular jurisdiction. So I haven't limited to Texas state law decisions. I haven't limited to U.S. federal court decisions. I could do that at the home page. Now, this is the thing about the Public Library of Law. For free, I'm getting 161 cases. The first one, as you can see, the date range is all over the place, although my results are coming back based on relevancy. So that's the reason for that. If I click on this second link right here, this is a Third Circuit decision from 1999. I'm going to get this amount of material here, but then the Public Library of Law is going to ask me to register. Registering is free. You just put in some information, and you get usually your email address is your username, and then you come up with a password. There's no charge for that. And then you'll get, after you register, you'll get the entirety of the opinion. There is an escalated subscription for the Public Library of Law. It's a subscription through Fastcase. And so if you're already a Fastcase subscriber, you can use the Public Library of Law. Of course, you can just go to Fastcase as well. It's the same content. But as you can see up here, there's 196 more results that are available to Fastcase subscribers. So again, the issue here in doing this kind of research is maybe you start with Find Law, maybe you go over to the Public Library of Law, maybe then you go to Google Scholar and you kind of put these pieces together, and you can do this all for free. However, there are some low-cost options through Lois Law Connect, through Fastcase, through CaseMaker, that may be appealing to you. And again, those low-cost options seem to be manifesting themselves a little bit more in the free materials such as the Public Library of Law. They're becoming a little bit more closely related. So again, that is how that works, and that's another source for those types of decisions. Google Scholar is an interesting product. It has all of the capabilities in the presentation of Google. I was looking over the comments I received from the webinar that we did back in May for about 6,000 ABA members, and I did see some comments from folks who wrote in, you know, I really don't like Google Scholar. I don't trust it. There's something going on. Of course, Google is right down the road here, so I have to be careful. But I find it to be quite useful, and again, it's another tool that you can use. It's not the only tool that you're going to want to use, but it is a good tool to supplement Find Law and the Public Library of Law and other resources out there. What I like about Google Scholar is it allows you to, at the page, at the home page, to click on legal documents, and it's going to give you the ability to set limiters on your search. So let's say you're practicing in Chicago and you're interested in decisions from the U.S. Court of Appeals for the 7th Circuit. You can click on this box right here and get all the 7th Circuit's decisions. You can also get the underlying district court opinions from the various regional districts in Illinois, Wisconsin, and Indiana, as well as the U.S. bankruptcy courts within the 7th Circuit. So again, a nice way to be able to limit decisions. Let's say I do a search just on the 7th Circuit. Let's say I'm interested in copyright decisions in the 7th Circuit. Of course, those of you who do copyright, practice copyright law or practice intellectual property law in any way will say, no, the 7th Circuit's not where you go get decisions. It's the 2nd and the 9th. You should know that. But that way, I'm giving you an example here because the 7th just has a few decisions. You're not getting a huge number. But if you click on that, you will see these decisions come on up. The word copyright is being taken either out of the title, the party names being the title of the decision, or somewhere in the decision or somewhere in the front matter for the decision, the word copyright comes up. And you'll see the decision come up again in the HTML within the Google interface. Now what's good about this is the search term is bolded. Okay, so it's kind of like Lexis and Westlaw when you do searches in those two products where the search term is bolded. The other thing is in many cases, a case that is cited in the opinion is linked, hypertext link, and that means that that decision is published in Google Scholar and you can click on it. There also may be instances, I'm not sure, that if decisions are available in another place on the web, Google Scholar will link into those. I don't know that for sure, although I suspect given Google's orientation of being a meta crawler, that very well may be the case. And so again, you want to just kind of work with that a little bit. This is an example right here where my cursor is on an article, Antitrust Bulletin, and unfortunately that's a situation where you're not going to be able to get that article, at least from Google Scholar, on the free web. And you usually will have to go to a law library or use some kind of subscription tool to get an article or that type of scholarly material. But again, at least you're seeing this here, you've got the decision and you know where to go. Again, you can always contact us at the Law Library of Congress and we'll point you in the right direction. Okay. So that's a little bit about Google Scholar. I'm going to come back to Google Scholar a little bit towards the end of the presentation to talk about other tools within that product, particularly in finding patents, for those of you who practice in that area. But many of the states now in particular are putting up websites that give the full text of court decisions in that jurisdiction. And I must say, California has done a wonderful job with this. I'm very impressed with this website. Now, they've partnered with LexisNexis. You're seeing more of this partnering with Lexis and Westlaw, where those two companies are providing the full text of the decisions. So in the case of California, here's the URL for the opinions from the judicial branch. The official reported decisions go all the way back to the founding of the state of California in 1850. So that's quite impressive. Most jurisdictions don't go back to the very beginning. If you scroll down this page a little bit, you're going to see here, there's your link for the official reported decisions. In California, the unpublished opinions, or those that are not designated as precedential decisions, are put up on the site for 60 days. And the justification that is given for that is that this is just to give public information about the actions of the courts of appeal in California. And so those are there. That's quite a unique feature as well. But let's say I want to do, I really only want presidential decisions. I'm not interested in anything that's not being considered as such. So I go to the official reports opinions link. And I have a number of options here on the left-hand side. What I'm getting is I'm getting a lot of interesting state law material for California. If you go down here a little bit further down the page, I have the annotated, Deering's annotated code for California. I'm getting the read unannotated California codes. And so there are a lot of different things here. I'm now, I have statutory and administrative law here. So again, this is what states are doing. They're doing a better job in California, as usual, is on the cutting edge of things. Doing a very nice job of putting a lot of this material in one place for you. Now let's say, though, I'm interested in published cases in California in both the Supreme Court and the Court of Appeal. Of course, usually the lower trial courts, finding published decisions for those courts in any state is a struggle. Sometimes the court websites have them, sometimes they're only available in the small county courthouse. It just really runs the gamut on that. But I have different options over here. I can do a term search. If I have a citation, I can do that, party names, judge, and there's also an advanced search option if I want to use a couple of those different options. Let's say I want to look at California published cases, and I want any case where the term San Francisco Giants appears. I could have just as easily put in Oakland Athletics, for those of you who are from the East Bay. I put in San Francisco Giants, and I come back, interestingly enough, with only 10 opinions. Maybe it's because the Giants moved here in 1958, and that's not that long ago, I suppose, in the grand scheme of things. But this is where you will see California court decisions where the San Francisco Giants baseball club is listed. It's also possible that the Giants are listed in federal court decisions. And of course, this big battle over the location of the new Oakland Athletics Stadium, whether it's going to be in San Jose or it's going to be somewhere in Oakland, we could see that end up in court sometime in the future as well. And so that's where this intersects. But here are my results, and as you can see, this is LexisNexis. This is what you see when you log into Lexis. And so you can click on the first decision, and you get the decision right here, and you're going to get very much what you see in Lexis. You're going to get links to decisions that are being cited. You won't, unfortunately, because you're not logged into regular LexisNexis, a link to any of the articles or anything of a secondary legal nature that may be cited, but at least you'll have the information. Now, of course, one of the really cruel things, I think, here is look at what you see what this red arrow is. You see that little yellow triangle? I think, oh my gosh, I've got Shepard's. Look at that. I can check and see all the decisions that have cited this decision. This comes from 1972, so it's probably been cited a few times. I can also see if the Supreme Court of California overruled this, or if the First Appellate District of the Court of Appeals overruled itself at some point. Well, of course, when I click on that, what happens? I get at the bottom that says to me that the Shepard Citation Service is not part of the subscription agreement. Well, this is not a subscription product. It's that the state of California, there's no allotment for that service within this. And so that brings me, of course, logically to the question, what about citators? What about checking these decisions for validation, making sure that they certainly haven't been overruled and that they're good law? But of course, if I'm interested, if I'm citing them in a brief, do I really want to cite something that has been criticized for whatever reason, repeatedly? And of course, the criticism might not be on the holding of the case in particular, or the part of the holding that I'm interested in. It may be on something else. It may be a distinction, not so much a criticism that other courts are making. And of course, these criticisms and distinctions may be coming from courts that are not binding on the court that came up with this decision. So it may not really matter to me. But anyhow, there may be reasons for this that I really want to be able to check this information out. So let's think about our options for citators. I'm going to go into the print world for a second here and say that if you go to law libraries today, you will sometimes see the old Shepard's volumes on the shelf. I graduated from law school 10 years ago, and of course I learned print Shepard's then. And I think those who came later, Barbara being one of them, they were slowly being taken off the shelves, particularly in academic law libraries. But some still have them in the Law Library of Congress if you're ever in Washington, or if you practice in Washington, we do have them on the shelf. Keysight, which of course is Westlaw's version of Shepard's, if you would. It is available in many publicly accessible law libraries through what we call a Westlaw Patron Access program. And so this is the case in the Law Library of Congress, where if you're in Washington, you can come into our reading room. We've got the Westlaw Patron Access on a couple PCs in that room, and you can put in a citation to a case, to a law review article, to something from the Code of Federal Regulations. You can put it in something from the United States Code. You put those different citations in and get results back. However, there are citators available in, and I mentioned these before, Lowest Law Connect. That citator is called Global Cite. CaseMaker's citator is called CiteCheck. And then Fast Case's citator is called Authority Check. And some of these tools have low-cost options. Okay, so that way you can pay a little bit, and then you don't have to go into a library and use, Shepard's in print or Keysight as part of the library's electronic resources. Now, of course, the logical question I should answer here is there anything on the free web that does this? There was for 4 years. There was something called Precedent, if you remember. They ran out of money. They essentially went out of business in 2009, but from 2006 to 2009, it was out there on the free web. Now, would I say you would have been able to use this over Shepard's or Westlaw or Keysight? I wouldn't have done that. But again, there's money involved in providing these services. So again, there's really nothing that's completely free out there on the web. That's the unfortunate thing. However, there are some options I think that may suit you depending upon your practice needs. One is if you go to Lowest Law Connect. If you just did a Google search for Lowest Law Connect or Lowest Law or Global Cite, you'll come up with this page. And this is the page for Global Cite. Of course, you can also, with many of these products, get a 2 or 3 day trial, and you'll have access to the citator. So that's another option. But one source that I think is quite interesting is CaseMaker's CiteCheck. And the reason this is interesting is if you write a brief or you have a pleading, someone in your office has done this, you can upload that document in Word or in PDF. You could upload it in text, but most people don't have it in that format. But let's say you have it in Word, you can upload that document, and for $10, CiteCheck will do a validation check of all the authorities in your document and give you a report. And that is pretty interesting, I think. And that's really the first that I've seen of a product offering something like this for that type of price. Now again, $10, if you're filing briefs left and right, it might not be the most cost-effective way of doing this. But again, CaseMaker is a pretty good product. It's certainly has a lot of authority and is well used across the country. So again, that is something that you may want to take a look at. Of course, if you have a subscription to CaseMaker, it's very possible, I don't know for sure, that the charges are waived for CiteCheck. In fact, I'm pretty sure they are, because a subscription would get you CiteCheck as part of it. So again, that's something just to keep in mind if you're doing some kind of citation check. Okay. Yes, absolutely.
Be sure to use the Blue Book, though. Use your Blue Book citation, because that's what it picks up on. So double check your citation first.
Right, absolutely. It's a very good point Barbara brought up, that because it's really linked into Blue Book, and probably both versions of the Blue Book citation. If you look at a Blue Book, you'll notice the practitioner rules are at the front. They're called the blue pages. At the front of the Blue Book, those are the rules that generally are used for court documents. The rest of the Blue Book really has an academic focus. That is definitely something to keep in mind. Before I move on, though, I want to go back one slide, just keep it on CaseMaker here for a second. Not because I'm necessarily going to talk about CaseMaker, but there was something that just came to my attention before I left the law library the other day to fly out here. And that is Fast Case, which I talked about a moment ago in terms of their citation tool authority check. This is not available for free, unfortunately, but Fastcase, at least right now, is available for free on a mobile device, an iPhone or an Android. If you go to Fastcase's website, or if you're on your device, that's probably the easier thing to do, go to their website on your mobile device. You can download the app for either iPhone or Android and get the full run of Fastcase in terms of the court decisions on your mobile device. One of the things that they're doing to sell this is, and unfortunately I don't have a web connection in this room so I can't show it to you, but I was reading it this morning. There's some language in there about if you're ever in court and you need to look up a decision really quickly, what are you going to do? You know, and we're here to save you. And so you can load the app on your mobile device and you can get to all those decisions, federal and state. Again, is it much better than going to FindLaw? Well, the one thing that might be nice about it is, again, I don't know if FindLaw has everything under the sun. It's really kind of hard to know that. But Fastcase is a very good product, and it definitely has a higher authority in terms of a source for these types of decisions than FindLaw does, although I do like FindLaw. It's not too far behind. One thing you don't get with the mobile version of Fastcase is the authority check. Again, they want you to subscribe fully for that, so that's the one downside there. But it's quite an interesting thing that we found out about the other day. I don't know how long they'll keep that going. I mean, it may be a promotional thing, and then one day we'll find out that you need to, for $5 a month, you can keep the app on your phone, or it's going to cost a certain amount of money to download the app. That's probably the way they would do it. But again, that's something to just keep in mind. And these things keep changing. So it's always good to just kind of poke around and to do some searches on the web to see if any of those products have deals on their citators or have free access, whether it be on a mobile device or right on a computer. Okay. So what I'm going to do is continue on and finish up with some of the key sites that are helpful for other types of legal research, and then we'll get to your questions and any discussion that you'd like to have on these matters. The Government Printing Office's Federal Digital Systems site, I mentioned that before in terms of being linked out of both Thomas and congress.gov for the PDFs of the bills and the public laws. This is a very busy site, but it's got a lot of good stuff on it, particularly if you're practicing in federal court. This is a good site to know about. You can do a search of the entire site at the advanced search option where you can limit your search to particular materials. However, what I often find myself doing is going over here to the Browse Collections and clicking on that, and I'll talk about that in just a moment. Here's the advanced search. Let's say you're interested in searching the Code of Federal Regulations, and there are other ways to search a CFR through federal government sites. But let's say I want to use this FDSIS site to do it. I can just go over here and click on Code of Federal Regulations. It gets added to my selected collections, and then I can do my full text search. I'm going to get results in both HTML and PDF for that. The Browse Government Publications link, though, the one on the right side of the home page, shows you the contents of each of the individual sub-collections. Okay. Now, if I scroll down this collection tab right here, if I'm on this collection tab, and I scroll down the page a little bit, actually, hold that thought for just a moment, I'll get to it. Let me show you, though, just the presentation of FDSIS. Everything, as I mentioned, and this was the case when I mentioned the CFR, comes in HTML and in PDF. And so let's say I'm looking up 2 UFC 138, which is the statute that keeps sometimes Barbara or myself in the law library reading room at 3 in the morning. The law library shall be kept open every day so long as either a House of Congress is in session. So if there's a floor meeting of the House or the Senate, we have to have at least one person in the law library reading room for members of Congress, and it's not so much the members, but it's the staffers, to call us. They don't generally do this because if you're ever, of course, if you're here on the West Coast, you probably have the best access to this. If you're ever watching C-SPAN or C-SPAN 2, and you see the House or the Senate doing something at what is 2 in the morning Eastern time, it's usually a lot of stuff that, you know, it's just talking. You know, sometimes there are votes, but when they're voting, they generally don't contact us either.
But we're happy to be there.
But we're happy to be there. Yes, absolutely. And this statute, as you can see, dates from 1888, and it really has its roots in a time when the Law Library of Congress is actually located in the Capitol Rotunda. We were actually right in the Rotunda, and we used to run books down to the floor of the House and the Senate. And then right around in the early 20th century, the Law Library moved over to the Jefferson Building, which is this is the top of the Jefferson Building over here on the right side of the screen. But this is still on the books, and so this is why we're still there. But anyway, I just point this out to show you the 2 different versions of the U.S. Code that you see right here. Now, again, if you go back to that Browse Collections link, again, we're back at the FDSIS homepage. And remember that Collections tab, if I scroll down towards the bottom of that, I can see the United States Statutes at Large, 1951 to 2010. Now the statutes at large, as you may know, contains all of the public laws in chronological order. Okay? So these are all the laws that are passed by Congress, signed by the President, and these are the laws themselves. We think of them in the statutes at large as being bound in print. And of course, what happens after these laws are passed is aspects of those laws that are of a general and permanent nature end up in the U.S. Code. Okay? So if there's an appropriations public law that's passed, many times it won't end up in the code because it's only appropriating funds for 1 or 2 fiscal years. If there's a portion of a law that sunsets after 2 years, it won't end up in the code. But many things do end up in the code, and many times those who are practicing in federal court want to look at the statutes at large in its official presentation. Well, the good news is that at least back in 1951, FDSIS has the statutes at large. Now, the statutes at large has only been published up through 2010. From 2010 to the present, what you want to do is go to congress.gov, and the easiest way to do this is just pull the PDF of the public law for the legislation for the last 3 years. You actually end up still going to the government printing office's site, but it's just because the statutes at large is really referring to a print item, and they don't issue these volumes very quickly at the government printing office. It just takes a long time for them to review this. But it doesn't mean there isn't a citation to the statutes at large. If you look at the statutes at large, you'll actually get a citation for a page that doesn't really exist yet, which is quite interesting. But let's say you're interested in looking at a public law from 1970. You go to the statutes at large link, you scroll on down. Let's say I find this interesting public law, an act to exempt potatoes from processing from marketing orders. Okay, let's say for some reason it's a Friday afternoon and, well, I'm just exploring the FDSIS site. I go over here to the PDF, and there I get the PDF of the public law as it's in the statutes at large. Now, for those of you who are used to using Hein Online, for instance, or the statutes at large is also available in PDF in LexisNexis, sometimes the image isn't quite as good in FDSIS, and by that I mean you see a little bit of the bleed through here from the scanning. But the good news is that it's up there, and hopefully these files will be improved in the future. I mean, it's certainly readable, and most of the time the PDFs are quite good, but I just want to tell you that sometimes, because these are scans just straight from the books, I believe Hein, for instance, uses other processes to take all of the bleed through from the back pages out. They haven't done that quite yet at the government printing office, but the material is here, and it's all there for you going back to 1951, so that is the good news. And then as you can see, let me go back to the first page here. You can look up individual public laws, you can look up private laws. There's also a link for presidential proclamations during a certain year. So again, there are other options for doing research at that site. Okay. I mentioned the Office of the Law Revision Council. This is part of the House of Representatives, and a couple important products at this site, uscode.house.gov. One is the beta version of the United States Code. This is in beta because, again, not because it's not authoritative information, not because it's something that you shouldn't be confident in using. It's in beta because the site is continuously being improved. And so that's just a term that's used generally by the IT entities on Capitol Hill to tell you that we may change the interface a little bit. You know, things look a little different than they did before. Don't worry, we're just trying to improve things. If you scroll on down the page, there's also the popular name table, the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act. Let's say you're doing a legislative history on that, and you really wouldn't need to because a lot of that is already compiled. And there are different resources for finding that information. But this is a way where you can get the public law number, the statutes at large citation for those popular names. If I click on this link here, click here for more information and access, I'm brought into the Office of the Law Revision Council's version of the U.S. Code. Now again, I mentioned this before, this is continuously updated. So it's very much like Lexis and Westlaw. It's also like the Legal Information Institute at Cornell Law School, where they continuously update their version of the U.S. Code. The Federal Digital System, or FDSys, where we would just work, they have the U.S. Code, but they don't update it. It is presented in terms of the official version of the code, which is released once every 6 years. So the latest version officially is the 2012 edition. And then there's a yearly supplement to each edition of the code. So if you're searching the code, I actually would go to the Office of the Law Revision Council site because the FDSys site is really more for straight archival use. And it's really best used by information professionals who are trying to build their own databases when it comes to the U.S. Code. When it comes to the other stuff I showed you, the statutes at large, that's all very helpful. But I think for research where you need the most up-to-date version of the statute, I would go here. Let's say I'm interested in something called a nuclear posture review. I received a question not terribly long ago from a military staff person on this. And I do just do a search on this. This is just like doing a full text search in Lexis or Westlaw, and I get 10 statutes back, okay? What I'm gonna wanna do is kind of scroll through the bolded terms in the statutes and maybe also look a little bit at the title of the statutes. I'm seeing all Title 10 right here, which is Armed Forces. That's the title in the U.S. Code on Armed Forces, so I know I'm in the right place. And let's say I think that 10 U.S.C. 494 is helpful. I click on that, and I come in here to the statute. The terms that I searched on are highlighted in yellow. Okay, so that's quite nice. But again, why is this help? Why is this really important? Well, look, if you look at the bottom of the statutory language in this box, this particular statute wasn't added to the code until the very end of the 112th Congress, one of the last, I think maybe it may have been the last public law passed during the 112th Congress, 239, officially one day before the 113th began, on January 2nd, 2013. If you use a version of the U.S. Code in print, or you're using it on the Federal Digital System site, 10 U.S.C. 494 will not appear in the code because there's a delay in the print publication of this. So again, this is why you would need to go to this site or the Legal Information Institute site at Cornell or Lexis or Westlaw to get this statute. And of course, you get your references as you would in any version of the U.S. Code to codification issues. If there had been a version of the statute codified at a different location before, you get that information as well below. Okay? Also, the Office of the Law Revision Council site has a version of the U.S. Code, popular name table. If you click on that popular tools link, and let me just go back to where it is. It's right there, popular names, right there on the home page. Scroll on to that, you get this, and it starts with popular names that begin with numbers, and then you can go over here and click on the particular letter that you're interested in. Let's say I click on C. I'm interested in popular names, federal laws where the word California appears. And this is what I see. Let's say I find the California Desert Protection Act of 1994 interesting. That was Public Law 103-433, published in volume 108 of the Statutes at Large, beginning at page 4471. Also codified in Title 16 of the U.S. Code, section 410 AAA. This is often what happens with very niche pieces of federal legislation. Now you might say, well, is this really a statute of a general and permanent nature? Yeah, this often falls into it because even though it's specific to desert land in California, it is general because it may implicate efforts nationwide. There may be language in that statute that's really would be interesting to people from outside of California. So again, this is what why this is helpful. Cornell's Legal Information Institute also has a popular name tool that is quite widely used. Now, of course, you can use these citations to find the language in the U.S. Code and in the statutes at large in the federal digital system. Okay. Regulations.gov. If you do administrative law work, this may be a site that will be helpful to you. There's another site that I don't have a screenshot of, and that's the ECFR, Electronic Code of Federal Regulations. That's just ecfr.gov. That's another site that is quite useful because it's continuously updated. If a regulation that was published in the Federal Register and then had a period of comment and then was published again in the Federal Register as a final rule, what will happen is in the ECFR that will be automatically put in and you'll have the most up-to-date version of the CFR. But regulations.gov is nice if you want to see what is pending out there, what's still in its comment period, what are the most recent regulations that are out there. And if I just click on the Department of Defense, let's say I'm interested in that, I could just continue this out with Department of Defense, or it'll actually go to Defense Department. It'll auto-complete my search. And then I come into this result here. And again, this site has a lot of information on it. I find it a little bit difficult to use. However, if you are interested in commenting on a proposed regulation, this is the one site you can go to and submit your comment. In many cases, you can also view selected comments. It's up to the agency, the department or the agency, issuing the rule whether or not they've allowed that capability in regulations.gov. But again, you can go in and look at those, and you can also limit your search to the type of document. So again, this is another site that is quite helpful. This is a result search for the Department of Transportation, where there are just regulations coming left and right, as you may imagine. USA.gov is the next site I want to talk about, and that is kind of like the guide to law online that the Law Library of Congress has that Barbara spoke of. But this is specific to all federal government websites, not just .govs, because .govs can extend to state governments, to other entities. But this is for the federal government, and what's quite nice is if I do a search on Patent and Trademark Office, I get links into really helpful material on the USPTO's website. I can also search within that website. I also am given the phone numbers, and if I can call through my computer, I can click on that little phone and talk to them directly if I need to get in touch with a patent examiner or something along those lines. I mentioned the Legal Information Institute at Cornell, and this is, interestingly enough, the URL is law.cornell.edu. You would think that would be the URL for the law school, but no, actually it's URL for the Legal Information Institute. And again, if you scroll down their homepage of legal resources, you get a variety of options. You can look at the US Code and the CFR. One of the useful tools they have, though, are their state law resources, and they have a topical index for state statutes. And so if you click on one of these links here, you'll get a listing of the statutes in each jurisdiction dealing with that issue. This is kind of like the 50 state surveys that you see in Lexis and in Westlaw. Maybe not quite as much detail as you would get with those two subscription products, but again, at least you're getting a listing of the applicable statutes, and you'll have a hypertext link to the statute, so you don't have to keep going around the web to find material. Now, sometimes in your research, what you want are articles synthesizing hot topics in law, analyzing things that have happened, court decisions, what have you. Lexis Web is a nice site. It's Google-esque in its presentation, and what it does is it's essentially a meta-crawler of legal material. It's just lexisweb.com. The one thing about this is it has a mixture of freely accessible material and material that is only accessible if you're logged into LexisNexis. And the way you'll know it is if I do a search on healthcare legislation, on the right-hand side here, I will see LexisNexis content right here. I'm sorry, Lexis.com content. And that is what tells me this is only available through Lexis. Now over here, this is a blog actually, so this would not be, this is not highlighted as Lexis material. It's down here where you see citations, tax treaties, reporter. It's a CCH item, which is only available through Lexis. But let's say I click on one of those links where it's not a Lexis.com item, and Oberkaler on their website has put up an article that may be of assistance to me. Again, what Lexis Web is doing is searching the web for content on law firm sites and other websites, not necessarily Lexis's. And if it is material on Lexis's website, again, it's normally protected by password. HG.org, conversely, has a lot of articles of the sort on its site that are not blocked by the need for a subscription. And so again, if I go into HG, I can do a search on this site here. I can actually just go ahead and just do a search right here at the top search box. And let's say I'm interested in H-1B visas. I will get an article from the Shapiro Law Group that was submitted directly to HG for publication on its website. So again, this is a nice product. And again, the articles vary in length. I mean, sometimes they're just fairly short. This is something that happened in federal court. You should know about it. And sometimes they go into quite a bit of an analysis on the issue. Okay. Presidential materials are often hard to find if particularly you're doing some kind of academic research on the side. I always like to mention the American Presidency Project because while it may not be germane to day-to-day practice for many people, it just has a lot of interesting material. Here is the URL at the top, and if you click on the documents link, you can see all of these options for presidential documents. Now, of course, if you're tracking legislation, particularly if you're interested in what the president states at a signing of legislation, you may want to look at the weekly or daily compilation of presidential documents where you can get the signing statements. There are executive orders and presidential proclamations going back to the very beginnings of the country as well as a separate category for presidential signing statements right here. So again, this may be of interest to you. Most of the material comes up in HTML. This is because before 1936 and the publication of the Federal Register, the government printing office did not officially publish executive orders and presidential proclamations. They were often just handwritten by the president and submitted. And there are some libraries that have those in microfiche, usually, microfiche or microfilm, depending upon how old it is. But again, they're very hard to read, and so this is a good site to be able to get this stuff from your desktop and other places. Nolo.com is a site that we often, as law librarians, suggest that members of the public, those who are pro se litigants, consult for background on law issues. But again, it can be helpful because NOLO does a good job of citing primary authority when it has information. And so if I go to the California Laws and Legal Information site, and let's say I scroll a little further down the page here to California laws on smoking in the workplace. This is very specific, very narrow. That's the one thing about NOLO, is that it has kind of a hodgepodge of more general legal topics and very specific topics. But here I get a little description on smoking in the workplace in California. But usually if I scroll further down the page, I will get a citation to the primary authority that serves as the basis for this short analysis. So again, another place that I just want to point out to. Okay, back to Google Scholar. We just got a few more things to look at. Google Scholar, and actually there's a separate Google Patents interface, they've been putting patents up on the site for many years now as an alternative to the searching for patents at the USPTO's website. And many people find the Google Patents presence a nice sort of change of pace, particularly if they're looking at patents a lot. There's a little bit more of a Google-like presentation in the sense that, there's not a whole lot on the page. It's a little easier to read. There's what we call links or metadata over here to the left-hand side where I can actually link into particular parts of the patent. And I get my PDF right away on a patent. As you can see, I did a search on the Weber grill. I wanted to find the original patent for a particular type of Weber grill, that circular one that we all know and love. And I get the patent in PDF here, but I also, here are my drawings. I also get some information on the inventors. Of course, under federal law, there always have to be individual inventors listed, and then the assigned company for this invention, Weber Stevens Products. And then I also get the prior art right here. So I'm getting the citations to the patents that were used to develop this particular grill, and then I'm also getting links to the subsequent patents that are citing this patent. This is something that you can do at the USPTO site, but Google has, again, I think a little bit easier interface, a little bit easier presentation to read. I also want to emphasize the importance of trade groups, of those groups that sometimes lobby for certain things. The Intellectual Property Owners Association, for instance, has a really wonderful website where they have a link for advocacy and they have a patent legislation tracking tool. Here is the URL right here. And what this does is this is tracking legislation in the current Congress on patent issues, as well as any documents regarding patent legislation. These links right here will take you into Thomas. Okay, so if you're tracking this type of legislation, this is a nice site to go to because they're continuously updating it because they have a vested interest in doing so. And they're linking you into where you can find the various versions of bills, and if a bill passed, you can get to the full text of the public law. And then finally, particularly if you're ever doing historical legal research, the Avalon Project at Yale Law School is a great site to find just about anything. If I go over here and click on 20th century documents, and I can go A to Z on these documents, as you can see, I have documents of various types. I have documents involving conflicts, international conflicts. I have acts, international acts. So, I mean, there's a lot of international law in here. I have the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990, which of course is federal law. That is the one downside, is that you kind of have to sift through a lot of stuff that's not related. However, when you do click on it, you do get the full text of this act in a very easy presentation, easy to read presentation, I should say. Although the one thing you do have to remember is that the presentation is based off of the original document. So in the case of the statutes at large, if I'm looking at the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990, I usually have to sift through and scroll down past the table of contents to get to the actual language. Okay, so that's just one thing that you may have to do. So again, the reason I show you Avalon is for really two reasons. If you're doing historical research, but also to emphasize that there are documents in the 1990s and in the current, in the first 2 decades of the 21st century. So it's not just historical in nature, although that's where its focus lies. Again, another good site to find material in HTML. If you found the Americans with Disabilities Act, you may want to go to FDsys and pull up the image of the original public law to go through it. You also will be, if you go to the popular name table with the statutes at large citation, you can see where in Title 42, Public Health and Welfare, you're going to see the various parts of the Americans with Disabilities Act. And then finally, when you're doing searching, I always suggest the use of multiple search engines, not to just stay with Google, but to use Yahoo, Ask.com, Lycos, Bing, what have you, to use the advanced search options with those tools. The Google Advanced Search is a very good one. And then a meta search engine, which basically searches search engines. And some of those are Clusty, Dogpile, Graball. Those are you're really doing a really big search of the web to get as deep into material as you can. And then this is just the Google Advanced Search. Let's say I want to do a search on cap and trade, but limit that search to only .gov results. So I'm limiting my domain. And this is what I get right here. I get my results right there. If I only want .coms or .edus for academic material, I can do that as well. Okay, so that is the presentation for this morning. The last slide, as you can see, has the phone number for the reference desk, where we are 8:30 a.m. to 5 p.m. Eastern Time, or 11:30 a.m. to 2 p.m. Pacific Time. No, that's not. No, I've got that wrong. It's like 5:30 a.m. See, I'm starting to get acclimated to the time change. 5:30 a.m. if you're doing work that early to 2 p.m. Pacific Time. And then you can always send us a question through Ask a Librarian right here at the link. And then you have my phone number, my direct email address, and Barbara's contact information as well. And I thank you so very much, and we'd be very happy to take your questions at this time. Yes?
My compliments. I've been doing this 40 years, and I've learned things today, and you've really done a superb job. My compliments.
Well, thank you so very much.
I published 45 books, but I wish I'd known some of these things. Trying to get in. My number one dead end is the appropriations rider.
Right.
It's the sneaky bastard. I'm sorry. Congress, gentlemen and gentlewomen of Congress, have said, well, this will be the statute, but our appropriation is limited, so the agency cannot spend any money on this. Where do I find appropriations riders, and is there a central place for finding where the sneaky bastard is?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, there is one place, and Barbara, you could certainly add to this. There is one place where you can find appropriations legislation. If you go back, and again, I would do it if I had a web connection in here, but if you go back, in fact, let me see if it's on the Thomas page, but Thomas has a link for appropriations legislation. Now, what I would do with that is you can pull up that legislation in HTML and normally do a search of the legislation and find the rider. Now, of course, the word rider doesn't appear there because it's a term of art for this. Yeah, let me pull this up. Well, I actually have to scroll all the way to it to make it look
I don't mean to put you out, it's just,
No, that's good.
it's curious how they do these.
This is an excellent question, and they do. They essentially, you know, put those, or they sneak them in there. And what you can do is, you see this link, appropriations bills. You can do this going back a few Congresses where you can pull different appropriations bills for different departments of the executive branch, and you can search through those bills, and usually if you just have an idea of what the rider is about, you can find it right there. Unfortunately, there's no place that I'm at least aware of where you can, you know, click on a link and this is going to take you right to what is considered a rider. But that is a very good question, and this is the way I would do it. I would go to Thomas, I would go to appropriations bills, and I would just do a keyword search, probably in the HTML version. It's a little easier. You could also do it in PDF, but it's a little easier, I think, in the HTML. Is there anything that you would add?
Thank you.
Okay, so Amy? Oh, the evaluations, yes. If you would, just would remind you on the way out, if you wouldn't mind just filling out the evaluations of the session. Thank you. Yes?
On that one site where you could upload a document and it would check all the citations,
Yes, that was the case maker. Yes.
is there a page limitation?
I don't see one. I'm going to go to that. It just says upload your pleading or brief. It doesn't show a page limitation on it. I don't see one there. Huh?
That same website, what exactly does it do? It looks like it's saying a computer will read it. So it's mechanically giving you information. It's not saying you use this improperly or something like that.
Right. It's just, what it's doing is it's taking the citation and it will give you the results, the validation results for that
Whether
citation.
it's been overruled or something like that?
Exactly.
Okay. And it'll be similar to shepherdizing in Westlaw, to say whether it was distinguished in another case.
Similar.
Oh, right, similar, yeah.
But that's why the Blue Book citation is so important, because when the computer reads it, it's triggered by that.
Can you use the California way of citing?
That is a good question. I don't know if you, perhaps in going through, and again, I have not used this myself, if you may be able to change the settings on it. I mean, I know I think Barbara's correct. It defaults to Blue Book, but I think you may be able to change to a local jurisdictional citation format.
But even that small difference of putting the parenthetical year in a different place,
Right.
that will mess it up. Or
It could.
It could.
I think it says right there you have to use Blue Book. On the
No, but
right
the California way is in the Blue Book.
It's in the Blue
Yes,
Book.
I know.
Just-
Yeah.
It's just a
Yeah, see,
different-
Blue Book format required, I mean, well, you'd almost have to go in and upload it, and of course, I hate to say it, pay your $10. And then,
Right.
at that point, see what options there are. I mean, the safest thing to do is probably to put the citations in Blue Book, even though you may not submit the brief with the citations in that format. You almost, if that were the case, you'd almost have to have two versions of the brief. Yeah.
I have a question for Barbara about the current legal topics. Are those essays written by library staff?
They are, yeah, they're written by specialists in those areas. So, and yeah, if you do have a question about it, you can call us and we can usually direct you to that person if they're still at the library.
I know you touched upon national and state. Are there any aggregators for local municipalities, or is that a whole different can of worms?
There is a site, and that's a very good question, and something that when we do the presentation next time would be worth adding, now that I think about it, is MuniCode. If you just did a Google search for MUNI code, all one word, there are a lot of municipal codes, both cities and villages, and sometimes even, well, not usually county law, but it's usually of a smaller, it's usually smaller jurisdictions, where you can get the codes for free. but I will tell you that it doesn't cover all jurisdictions by any stretch. I had a question the other day back in Washington where someone needed the municipal code for Bethesda, Maryland, and it's not there. Silver Spring, Maryland's there, but Bethesda isn't. Generally, counties will put their codes on their websites.
I am aware of meeting codes. My
Yeah.
thing was I was looking for past versions of those.
Oh, past versions.
Yeah, that's tough.
So you mean, are you specifically talking about, superseded versions?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I think you're probably not going to find that on the free web. You may have to, or with the codes, you may have to contact the county law library even, because many times those are available only there. Or I will tell you, the Law Library of Congress has a lot of random stuff, and we may have that in print. So, that's another option. But a lot of the time, particularly if it's more than 15, 20 years old, the code was only available in print. Most libraries discarded it when it was superseded or was replaced in full by a new version, and then usually it's a county law library that kept the archival copy.
Or sometimes the state archives, every once in a while, will have something.
Right, exactly. The state archives are always good places to go, and sometimes the state archives actually have a legal department where they've got legal material along.
And they usually have Ask a Librarian and stuff on there too, so.
Got a quality control question about these free sites.
Right.
When Shepherds and Keysight, Lexis and Westlaw first came out, the American Association of Law Librarians did a search on identical terms and came up with 5 to 10% different cases using the two different things. So that, if you're arguing in front of the U.S. Supreme Court, maybe you don't want to miss those 5 or 10% because your key case might be in there. So if you're using these free ones, I would assume that you're going to get even more missed cases and worse results. And so has anybody studied these free sites versus these paid sites?
Well, that's a very good point that you bring up. In terms of the free sites, I'm not aware of a study on that. I know that one of the latest studies was done by Susan Nevlo-Marr, who's the director at the University of Colorado's Law Library, and she presented her findings at the AALL meeting last year in Boston. And I believe she came up with that 5 to 10% variance between Shepherds and Keysight. And it did disturb a lot of librarians in the room, I must tell you that. In terms of variance, there are a couple ideas with this that I have. One is when it comes to the validation of cases, ideally, and again, we can't say for certain, but ideally, if a case had been overturned, literally, it's not good law anymore. I'm going to say on the record that I hope that all of the available citators, free and not free, have that information. And I hope that particularly what Susan found when she did this study was a variation in the not so important distinctions. Where the case is distinguished or maybe it's criticized, but I even hope it doesn't go into the criticized category, that it's just the distinguishing cases. But I don't recall for sure. Basically, I think what this means at the end of the day is the most products that you can use, the better. So if you can go and use CiteCheck for $10, and then, if you've got a case in front of the U.S. Supreme Court, it'd be a good idea to come into the law library and use Keysight, or if you're in the arguing in front of the U.S. Supreme Court, you are already a member of the Supreme Court Bar, which means you have access to the Supreme Court Library in the Supreme Court building, and they've got license in Westlaw there. So, you shouldn't have to worry about that. But what I would do is use multiple products, and what I would do is check, particularly if you want to use one of the subscription resources, use either Shepherds or Keysight to touch base with one of the academic law libraries in your area, or if you have a larger public law library, and see if they've got access to those. They very well may. More and more libraries are giving that access to public patrons. And of course, if you're if you're close to the law school that you attended, you may have alumni access to this. Is there anything?
No, I think you pretty well covered it. I mean, feel free to use more than one resource. I mean, that we always suggest doing that to make sure you cover your bases.
Right, and again, I really hope that when it comes to overruled decisions, you'd see it anywhere. You really start. Yes, ma'am. Question.
I have a couple of my colleagues. They're from the Alameda County Library, and I don't know if you all are familiar with it, but anyone can use the library, and we do have the Westlaw, Nexus, so you can do your searching, do your Keysight, Shepherds. It's free except for printing, which is nominal fee of 20 cents.
Oh, that's outstanding. That is really great. So it's Alameda County.
It's in Oakland.
In Oakland, okay. Excellent. So we've got the Bay Area covered.
Any county in California should have one.
Okay.
And one in San Francisco as well.
Oh, great. Okay, excellent. California. Excellent. I want to applaud. That's outstanding.
1870s.
Yeah.
Do you have any comment? I understand very recently, Lexis and Westlaw have abandoned giving you a short-term rate and are requiring you to have the yearly rate.
You know, I'm not aware. Well, that's interesting.
Yeah, we don't really do the contracts.
We don't do individual contracts like a period contract in any of the libraries I've been in. I do know that, and this has been the case for many years now, you have the option, of course, firms of various sizes have the option of hourly or transactional arrangements. But it doesn't surprise me that there are more options now. I don't know the specifics of those options in terms of whether they're worth it.
I'm saying they're withdrawing them.
They're withdrawing them. Oh, okay. Okay, well then we're going the opposite way here. They're actually not allowing you to do that.
And requiring a yearly subscription.
So you actually have to commit for a year. Well, thank you for telling me. I actually had no idea about this, and I appreciate your comment on that. That is opening up, and I think this is what's happening. It's opening up the market a little bit for fast case and case maker maybe to get in there. And Lois Law has always been pretty good, and now that it's owned by Wolters Kluwer, I'd give it even higher marks. To kind of get in there and offer, you get a trial, and then you can subscribe to certain components of the source, and it's a little bit more of an a la carte arrangement if that's good for you.
I want to say thank you, and I want to, it's 11 o'clock, but from past experience, I bet that Matt and Barbara will stay and answer your questions.
As long as we need to.
As long as you have questions. So let's say thank you to Matt. Don't forget to fill out those questionnaires so you can tell the ABA what a fabulous job they did. Thank you. Thank you, guys. I'll be back. I got to say hi to Jess.